Good afternoon, everybody. I'll try to make this quick. Peter Piot told the New York Times earlier this year that 2005 was the least bad year in the history of the AIDS epidemic. But I'm telling you today that we are losing the struggle against this disease. 5 million new infections last year, 3 million dead, among them 500,000 children gone. It was the worst year yet for those we've lost. In 7 minutes, I can't make a comprehensive analysis of what's happened to us over the past 2.5 decades, so I'll make 3 quick points. First, I'd like to refer you to a book that has nothing to do about AIDS. It's called Famine Crimes by Alex de Waal. He's talked about how the humanitarian aid industry has worsened and perpetuated famines, particularly in Africa, and it provides an analytical framework through which we need to interrogate our AIDS work. I talked about this a long time ago in Bangkok, 2 years ago, and I don't have time to elaborate on it today, but I want to talk to you very quickly about the bottom lines. I think we've created a vast infrastructure that is largely unaccountable, self-justifying, pursuing organizational survival and expansion, privileging the policy occupations of the major industrialized countries, privileging generalized international responsibility instead of specific local political accountability, privileging technical experience and skill over local knowledge, and promoting development or assistance instead of social change. No wonder things aren't getting better. We've created a system that's designed to fail. Yet in the margins of this system, there remain men and women, yes, heroes for some of us, who are largely forgotten, unknown, ignored, or reviled by those who make this machine run. It's not Bill Gates or Bill Clinton who've made the difference in this epidemic, despite their welcome to this meeting as some sort of royalty. The seduction of money and power that they represent have blinded us to what they've really delivered to us. The real heroes are people like Christopher Maraca, Dasha Otrette, Paul Kasana-Kimona, Thomas Kai, Lun Gangte, Rajiv Kaufel, Michael Callan, Scott Slutsky, Sunil Pant, millions of people that I cannot describe here, all of whom have changed and some who are still changing the world, often at great personal risk, while you were looking elsewhere and took no notice of them. Second, we need to reinscribe the fight against AIDS as part of a larger movement for social and economic justice. Our heroes knew and know this. It's no surprise that where we find AIDS, we find other infectious and chronic diseases like TB, diabetes, obesity, heart disease, asthma, mental illness, and social epidemics like crime, violence, and poverty. Unless we start looking at the factors, the root causes that drive health disparities, and otherwise why some of us get sick and some of us don't, we will always be treating one illness while the patient dies of another. It's no coincidence that these multiple epidemics exist among marginalized communities across the globe, among the poor, women, drug users, sex workers, gay men, prisoners, migrants. The social, economic, and political policies that create this marginalization in the first place also push us into the path of oncoming epidemics. Yet we place our hopes in prevention programs that narrowly construct risk around individual behavior or in some new technology that will save us. Even those who profess to be deeply concerned about HIV prevention, like Mr. and Mrs. Gates, have little stomach for facing the structural and environmental factors that are the fuel for this great fire of an epidemic, and they watch the flames grow because to act on these issues moves beyond charity and into the realm of politics. That brings me to politics. We have to repoliticize AIDS. There are dear colleagues like Edwin Cameron and Zaki Ahmad in South Africa, and those I respect like Kevin De Kock and Tom Frieden in New York City, that have made the case we need to de-exceptionalize and remedicalize AIDS. I agree that we need to rethink HIV testing and that accepting that millions of people live and die without knowing their HIV status is totally unacceptable. I support making HIV testing easier to do, integrating sound evidence-based public health strategies into our approach to AIDS, and integrating HIV into strengthened systems of care and prevention for infectious and chronic diseases in general. However, the presumption by Kevin De Kock in particular that we need to abandon a rights-based approach to HIV/AIDS in order to do so is frankly reactionary and just plain wrong. The calls to de-exceptionalize AIDS and return it to its proper medical context can easily become calls to turn us back into patients and victims, passive actors in the epidemic. No doctor likes patients who talk back, and either do governments. They can become calls to ignore or downplay the social or economic aspects of HIV that I just referred to above, and push AIDS back into the realm of medicine, where the solutions are only biomedical. They can become calls to make AIDS as unexceptional as all the other ills, both medical and otherwise, that affect our communities, when we should be claiming that health for all and social and economic justice is a human right. I know it's unfashionable these days to talk about rights, and particularly then to fight for them as if one really meant them. AIDS is essentially a crisis of governance, of what governments do and do not do for their people. We have the drugs to treat HIV infection. We have the tools to confront the risks that drive HIV transmission and prevent infection itself. What we don't have is national political will. We've demanded too little from our leaders and excused too much. Except for the cries of a few brave activists, most people in countries around the world affected by the epidemic have not risen to hold their governments to account, to say these are our rights and these are your obligations. Even well-established movements like the Treatment Action Campaign in South Africa consist of only a few thousand people and struggle for funding. How can this be? Why aren't there millions of people around the world demanding action or telling their leaders to stand down? I know it's hard to some of us work in places where political action is difficult or impossible, but it's possible in more places than you think. The sad fact is that some of us with resources, the ability to change things ourselves, have a real inability or a blindness to see what the epidemic is, see the epidemic for what it is, a political crisis, or we've made a decision to do so because complicity with the systems of power that perpetuate and worsen the epidemic is easier for us. We're in a terrible anti-political moment right now, where the powers that be have taken our rhetoric and told us that everything is fine. We're on your side. You can demobilize and leave the epidemic to us. That is the pernicious message of this conference. Don't believe a word they say. It's been the worst year of the epidemic for so many of us. The question is whether we're going to stand up and make a promise today, as one of my heroes, the late great Vito Russo, did back in 1988. He said, "We're so busy putting out fires right now that we don't have the time to talk to each other and strategize and plan for the next wave, and the next day, and the next month, and the next week, and the next year. And we're going to have to find the time to do that in the next few months. And we have to commit ourselves to doing that. And then after we kick the shit out of this disease, we're all going to have to be alive to kick the shit out of this system so that this never happens again."